a civilization that stretches from the 8th century BC with its archaic beginnings across over a millennium, and whose influence reaches far beyond even the fall of the Roman Empire, since Latin culture and Roman ideals will endure as the foundation of Western European culture long after the Roman Empire itself is gone. This culture makes many contributions to the story of law and justice. And the first that we'll explore is the idea itself of republicanism. Many of our own political words come from Latin, and it's a testament to the importance and the lasting influence of Roman ideas. And one of these words is republicanism. Republicanism is an idea that, as we will see, has tremendous influence in the context of the early American political experience. But we need to explore what it means. What is republicanism? What is a res publica? And to understand the idea of republicanism and the unique contribution that the Roman Republic makes to the history of the way we can think about law and justice, we need to have some vocabulary that we share with the ancient Romans. And so in this lecture, I'd like to introduce to you 3 Latin terms that are essential for thinking like an ancient Roman, that are essential terms for beginning to enter into the mindset of ancient Roman thinking about law and justice. Libertas, virtus, and res publica. Understanding these 3 terms is not only illuminating when we try to understand how the Romans thought about law and justice, but in fact can be illuminating for us and for our own understanding of the way that we think about politics, about law, and about justice. So let's begin by defining 3 terms. Libertas. It means liberty. Our word liberty comes from the Latin libertas. But to understand Roman republicanism, we need to understand what libertas means in the context of the ancient Roman world. Libertas has very specific connotations, and it'll help even to remember previous conversations we've had and previous readings that we've examined together, like Isaiah Berlin's 2 concepts of liberty. In that essay, he outlines one meaning of liberty, what we can call a liberal concept of liberty, as the freedom to do as you want. He outlines a second concept, what he calls positive liberty in his idea, which is an idea of liberty in the sense of having power, of having the capacity, the ability, the right, the enfranchisement to perform a certain set of actions. Liberty in this sense is the power, the freedom that is granted to the citizen within a political order. And for the Romans, libertas clearly has a strong sense of the right of the citizen. And for the Romans, libertas comes to mean the ability of the citizens to rule themselves. And it has a strong connotation of living in a type of polity that lacks a king, in which the citizens govern themselves without the rule of a monarch. And the Romans, as we'll see, come to believe that you can only be free in the absence of a king, in the absence of a monarch's rule, that the citizens are only free when they are not under the domination of a sovereign monarch. And for the Romans, you cannot truly be free unless you live in a self-governing community. Libertas. Also, virtus. And for the Romans, these ideals are all closely interconnected. Virtus for the Romans is where we get our word virtue. It comes from the Latin word vir, V-I-R, vir. A vir is a man, and virtus is manliness. It's the quality of being a man. And for the Romans, manliness has a specifically military connotation. Manliness is courage. It is, above all, this principal virtue, courage. For the Romans, a real man is a man who will stand his place in the line of battle, a man who lacks fear, a man who is willing to sacrifice himself for the greater good, for his community. And for the Romans, this is what virtue is. Virtue is the willingness of someone to sacrifice themselves for the greater good, for their country. This is where we come to have the understanding of virtue in general as the kind of moral goodness that requires self-sacrifice. And for the Romans, virtus, manliness, virtue, is the foundation of a free republic. And this is a central idea of republicanism. It says that you can only truly have freedom in a republic if the citizenry is virtuous. And this will be a tremendously influential ideal throughout the centuries. that somehow the citizens of a republic must be virtuous to preserve that way of government. It's a very Roman idea that the greatness of a country is a function of the virtue of its citizens, that the willingness of the people to sacrifice for a common good is what will determine the destiny of the country itself. Libertas, virtus, and res publica, where we get our word republic. It comes from two Latin words, res, which is thing, and publica, which is public. And it literally means the common thing, the public thing. We might say the commonwealth, the shared destiny. It means something like the country. It means something like the state. It means something like the community. And the way that our word community, in its etymology, seems to suggest the things that we share in common, the common life that we inhabit together. So res publica connotes all of these things, the way that a community shares its destiny, the way that they are part of a collective, common project. And this, for the Romans, is the res publica, the state, the country that's bigger than any one individual. And the res publica implies that there is a commonwealth, that there's a shared destiny. In fact, that there's a certain amount of harmony within the society that makes individuals within that society willing to sacrifice for each other. The res publica means a community of interest, that there's a shared interest across the society, and in particular, between the rich and the poor. And as we'll see throughout the history of Rome, this is one of the central tensions in the reality of the Republic, between the interests of the wealthy and the interests of the poor. The Republic, the Romans believe, can only exist where there is sufficient concord, where there's sufficient harmony between the different elements of society. For a republic to exist, there must truly be a common shared interest in the well-being of the state. And so these ideas, which are expressed most clearly in the ancient vocabulary itself, libertas, virtus, and res publica, will animate a unique ideology of law and justice that is expressed in the Roman Republic.